Let's drone out.
This is like a little side series. I usually do Let's Drone Out, and I kind of wanted to do a few intimate podcasts with a few people I really like, get random people that might, who I find interesting together and see what they come out with. So this is like a little side series bonus podcast, which I haven't quite figured out what to do with, but I want to upload them, I think, to begin with on YouTube. I've done one so far with Chad Kappa, the inventor of flight test, and this is going to be the second episode. So with me today, I've got Lee from Painless 360, and say hello again.
Hello.
And also accompanying us is Boris B.
Hello.
Hello. And I'd like to say, Boris, I'm still a massive fan. I've still got a shrine for you next to my shrine of David Winderstall, and slowly I'm erecting a shrine of Painless 360. Yeah, it was lovely meeting you, Painless, this weekend at the Hobby King event.
It was very nice. We were both at the Hobby King live event at the weekend here in the UK, and Jack and I talked. It was actually quite a nice little event, and Jack and I had never met in real life, even though we've done lots together. So I was stood by somebody that Jack was talking to, and Jack, I don't think realized it was me until I spoke and said, "Hello, Jack," and he instantly recognized the voice. And this big grin broke over his face, and there was lots of hugging. So it was nice to meet you too, Jack. It's finally good to put you to the voice that I'm used to talking to on Skype.
Yeah, that's how I recognize you too, because in the I actually didn't know immediately who you were. Even when you said your name, Jack, I didn't really think about it, but
yeah.
when you started talking, I was, oh yeah, that's him. Very original voice.
Well, bless you. Thank you for that. Usually, if I say bits and bobs, that's usually when people know it's me.
Or cute. Very distinctive cute. Or happy flying. That's definitely
Yeah, happy flight. Welcome to the video. Yeah, that's the other one as well. It's amazing how many people at the weekend realised who I was, not because they were looking at me, because they were stood next to me when I was talking to someone else, and they heard the voice and thought, I recognise that, and then turned around and saw the cap with the logo on. So it was great. But Boris, thank you very much for the time and coming on tonight to talk to us. As Jack's already said, I'm a huge fan. I've been following Betaflight since it was initially a fork back in the day. And actually, I was talking to a couple of pilots at the weekend who were having a couple of problems with their, I think it was a 180 class quadcopter. And one of the suggestions I gave to them was to try it with Betaflight, because they weren't amazingly running Betaflight already. And all the work you've done, I thought it was worthwhile them testing that out to see if that got rid of some of the problems they were having. Particularly around vibration and some of the vibration being read incorrectly as movement. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what the future of Betaflight is, because you talked last time on the podcast about how it came about and how you were focusing on, it was the flight characteristics really that you wanted to really dive deep into. But now Betaflight is, what are we on? 2.8 now, is it? That's currently out. You're working on 3.0. Oh,
2.9 and
2.9.
You'd know that if you had the configurator.
Actually, there's not a lot of difference between those two. It's kind of intermediate version. We're going up to the next big version, which is 3.0, which is a lot of work being done around the I/O structure of the code. To be able to add new targets easily, to review them. And it's more going deeper down to the hardware of hardware drivers of the firmware, which which was kind of mess, you know. It all started with an ACE32 and then some other targets being added, and the code got cluttered, you know. All those target specific codes was all the way through the code, hard to review, and paying to add a new target, and kind of really hard to understand for some newcomers. And well, everybody knows that there are so many different flight controllers out there, and I get messages from people all around the world. They want to make a new flight controller because it's getting easier. Everybody knows what kind of hardware and stuff you need to make a target, and I'm really accessible about it. I let them all, you know. I'm not picky about not wanted to add the code, so I always, you know, just see if it makes sense and I add it. So I think I kind of enabled maybe the much easier way to add new targets. And problem now is that there are more and more new targets on the market, and that part of code needed a clean up. So that's going to happen in 3.0. It's going to be really easy to add new targets. It's going to be, you know, even for someone who doesn't really know how to do real, you know, coding, you would be able just to define what pin does what, and it will all work out, you know, without a lot of trouble. So that's the next step, what we want to do, you know, to make a open source code which is really not specifically for particular hardware, and we're almost there. So well, actually that part is not something that's a big difference, because when I started this project it was mostly me doing stuff and sometimes some other people helping me with that. But as it always goes in open source, you get more and more people, more developers into it, and you know, and it's kind of starts taking off. For example, I almost didn't do anything about it, just some reviewing and helping and making some decisions, and there were a couple of other guys doing all this work. So, well, that says enough about the project. So it kind of got big, you know. It was an experimental project, but at the moment, so many people working on it, and so much work being done. So yeah, you have to take it to the next step. So what I did was, one of the things always, there was always a big need to have a configurator, because, you know, I tried to stay as close as possible to Cleanflight, you know, to be as compatible as possible. But at the moment, there were so many new parameters, so many new different stuff, you know, which needed to be done through the CLI, and well, not everybody's really keen on doing stuff through the CLI, so I had to get a Betaflight configurator. I'm not, you know, it's not my part I'm best in, you know, doing this HTML, CSS, you know, Chrome application stuff. So there were a few guys, they offered me to help, and yeah, as you all probably know, there's already Betaflight configurator. You can download Flash firmware easily. You can access some special parameters which are not there in Cleanflight. Well, maybe they're getting into there. And I did kind of change some stuff around the traditional configurator view, where you can, you know, one of the stuff which was lacking the rates, for example. Nobody never really understood what the rates were doing. So we added a rate calculator into the PID tab. So you're now able to change rates and immediately see what happens with those rates. And we're now working on a 3D model where you can, for example, if you have a battery hooked up, you can also test with your transmitter with the 3D model what actually happens with your quadcopter when you have a rate configured like that. So before you go out of field, you can already, you know, get a, you know, when you're new to this and you want to play with rates, you can already test it before you even flew. So those kind of stuff, that's extra what we added. And well, of course, some old Betaflight features what always needed to be activated through the CLI can now be done through the configurator, and which makes things easier for people. Because one of the things I was really tired about, it was getting so many messages and questions. How do I do this? How do I activate this? So, you know, it just made a lot of sense to bring out a Betaflight configurator. So.
How many times did people ask you what CLI meant?
Oh man, so many times. Even some guys which are not really, you can have guys who have no idea about what they're talking about, some newcomers, but I'm really talking about some, really big people in this hobby who are not, who know a lot about this stuff and still asking me, how do I do that? How do I change the gyro loop speed? How do I change what's the way? How do I do the loop time? How do I, all these kind of questions. It just, it was I was getting tired of it. For example, people, how do I activate multi-shot? How do I activate different PVM rates? So all these things, those were, combinations of CLI commands, because that was the only way to stay compatible with Cleanflight configurator, to keep the MSP interface, which is to the configurator, keep that same as, for example, for Cleanflight, but the CLI part, can be different, and it's much easier to add new stuff, remove it, and for testing purposes, it's ideal. But as this, became a main firmware in a lot of communities, I saw a lot of people don't really use Betaflight where it was initially for testing and giving feedback, make a flight testing community. That was actually why it's called Betaflight, but that's not anymore, actually. So that's why I really needed this configurator, and I put a lot of time and effort to get some people to work on that last few weeks, because it makes my life easier, and I already noticed that. So.
Well, I must admit, I wasn't sure when I first saw the configurator. I was kind of confused as why there were two versions of it, until I looked at the latest version of Betaflight and realized that you're repurposing a lot of the tick boxes in the interface to allow people to access things like the rates, for example. The D term in the in one of the, it now does something else, and I can see exactly now why having your own graphical user interface with your own fields to access the Betaflight stuff makes sense. So, initially, I think I was one of quite a lot of people that were a little bit confused about why we needed two. But I think as Betaflight diverges and adds more features into Cleanflight, it makes sense. So looking forward to the future, then we've got version 3 on the horizon, which is exciting. I know you work with Dominic at the moment, and I know Dominic's. One of the ideas was you were developing code to perfect and then go back into Cleanflight. Is that still going to happen? So you're going to?
Oh yeah, that's still happening. That's still happening. For example, I talk a lot with Dominic. We there's these two projects are always together. I'm collaborating on Cleanflight projects. GitHub on pull requests from other users, and he's also helping on mine. We're watching each other's project to contribute each other. So the main idea is to have Cleanflight to be like, when you want to have a very safe firmware, which is always more professional, less updates. That's what Cleanflight is.
Older, reliable.
But trying new things. Without with having a bit more risk to cause damage, let's say that, let's put it that way, to switch to try things out, because some things really, for example, flight behavior, before all these flight controllers were written by a couple of developers doing some hover tests and determining whether it's good or not. It wasn't really helping, because there was much more to do with that. So there has to be, there was a need for a playground, which was Betaflight, and that still is, for example, because this new F4 code with the rework on the I/O stuff, it's probably gonna be merged back into Cleanflight very soon, after it's proven that it's right. So the same developers that are working on Betaflight are also going to merge that back into Cleanflight. So before I was doing those kind of things together with Dominic and some others, but as I really don't have that much time to work on two separate projects, I have another guy who is working with me on Betaflight and also merging this stuff back into the Cleanflight, because that's really helping. Working on two projects, it's really hard. It's with all this with all this stuff, there's so much free time, it's easy to lose a lot of free time, just helping people, because that's what I like. I like to help people with their tuning, with their stuff, but it simply isn't possible. I have a regular job from 9 to 5, and I have a family as well. For me, it's not possible to stay 24/7 on this project and help people, code new stuff, test new stuff. I really, I really needed to hand off some things. And for example, one of the things is this guy Martin Budden is, he's working with me on Betaflight, and he's already always merging the stuff back into Cleanflight, and also bringing some stuff from Cleanflight into Betaflight, and helping a lot. Even there's a lot of people who work with documentation stuff, the wiki, and helping other guys on, for example, RC groups. I'm pretty active there as well sometimes, but it's impossible to keep up with all the messages popping up. It eventually comes down to the community to give support. There's this guy in the US, Joshua Bardwell. He did a lot of explanation about features, and for me it was really, for example, when I introduced air mode, how do you explain that to someone who has no idea how this stuff works? It's how you cannot explain something without showing them how the stuff really works, and that takes time. Even like for example, the videos you make, that's a almost as well full-time job as it is coding stuff and testing stuff. That's you cannot be one person. I cannot split up and do all kind of things, explaining, documenting, and keeping up with all the comments. So I was really glad to have these guys to help the community explaining how the things work.
Well, that's really good, because ultimately you want to do something you enjoy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've learned. Oh, carry on.
Sorry, Jack, I was just going to say that thank you for mentioning Joshua Bardwell. Is that the chap's name, Joshua Bardwell?
Yeah, I'm just messaging him on Skype now. Oh, awesome.
Hey, I've watched quite a few of his videos, and he goes into fantastic detail. So if it's probably over the head of a newbie, but if you've been in the hobby a little bit and you want to know what that term actually means, how it works, and the stuff he's done around looking at the Blackbox recordings is fantastic. I've learned so much from watching his videos. He's a treasure. So whatever you're paying him, it's worth it.
Well, I'm not paying, because the thing is, do you know how how the Blackbox? There was this guy, who Nick, he invented Blackbox for Cleanflight. I always, was interested in. I'm in this hobby for quite a few years, and I was enjoying it more like a hobby, flying, tuning, not really looking into the code. That part wasn't really, even though I was always interested into that, but I never really found a good way to visualize stuff. You have to visualize it to be able to understand what can be improved. And the first time I saw Blackbox, I was like, wow, this is going to change things. And
life changing.
I posted the first time I made some overlay videos with the Blackbox, and that's where he saw that, and that's what triggered him to start following my projects. As that was also for me the time to start developing, because the first time I saw the Blackbox logs, I was like, what the hell is going on, man? Are we flying the quads with that kind of oscillation and noise? I never even imagined that there was so much noise in the system. I thought these guys who developed the code before, it's coming from the multi-V open pilot guys. I thought they did such a good job. We are getting minimum vibrations and minimum noise. But till I first time saw the Blackbox logs, I was shocked.
Outrage.
I immediately knew there's so much to improve there, and that's what triggered me to jump on this project, because I never thought that there's I thought it's PID controllers, it's all thought out. There's nothing to improve. What new can we do about it? There wasn't much changing. there was not much focus on that part, flight control. Even, when you look to the Cleanflight project, Cleanflight was exactly same like base flight versions, first base flight. Nothing was changed. Maybe some new PID controllers were added, but all those PID controllers were pretty much the same at different rates, different, couple of stuff were different, but still the same noise. These filters, they were using the filters which were meant for the mobile phones, because all these gyros are actually made to fit into a mobile phone. That's the main production purpose of these evanescence gyros. And it's not the biggest sell. Is the mobile phone industry. And the mobile phones don't really suffer big vibrations, so there are these hardware filters, all purposed to for normal usage, not for this high frequency noise we had on the quads, especially mini quads. So that's what triggered me. I saw some guy, I can't remember, Robert. He worked on a base flight project, and I know before that he was busy with a lot of filtering, and I approached him and I asked him to help me out to understand software filtering better, because that was not something I did before, and I wanted to know more about it, picking up some stuff I learned from school as well, which was a long time ago. And he helped me a lot in the beginning to show me what kind of filter, what kind of research he did before. It never really got into base flight. I know he was working on it, but nobody ever was interested in that. I don't know. I still don't know why, but I think it's because back then we were not able to visualize what filters could change in terms of the noise or a signal going to the motors. So that was my first step to start testing with it. And after my first flights with the filters, I noticed that there's so much more than the PIDs. The PID loop. There's so much more to what impacts the flight characteristics and tuning, and that the PIDs are maybe not even 50% of it all. There's so much more going on there. So, which all required, and that's of course, always intrigued me to continue that project. After I was done with filtering, new stuff popped up. For example, people always complaining about the low throttle, and there was always a difference, between the zero throttle or half throttle. You just could feel that the stabilization was different. So I always thought maybe you need more power, to do stuff, but it didn't really make a sense. So I found interesting discussion from one of the I don't know, I forgot his name, Bob, the American guy, I believe, somewhere in GitHub. That was also one of the important stuff which got lost in the Cleanflight project. It was so big, so many code changes, so many pull requests, and this guy wasn't even really, his story wasn't convincing. First time I was reading, I was like, what does he mean? He had a code, he had an example code, like proof of concept, how he could improve the low throttle stability with different mixer approach. But nobody even noticed that, and I was looking into that, and then even I complained about it. Come on, that's what do you miss with low throttle? It's fine, whatever, it flies. But then all this stuff, the flight behavior was evolving from pilots. There was more hang time being introduced, these idling up. So I remembered the words from this guy. So I found his story, his example code, like proof of concept for this new different mixer approach. And I started thinking about it. And then I realized that the current mixer, which was used in the Cleanflight, it was completely not correct, actually. It was not translating the PIDs generated from the PID controller to the motors like the way it should. Only 50% of your calculated PIDs were getting into the motors. So that's why all this stuff with TPA was introduced in the past, because the mixer wasn't linear. That was the step, to start thinking to introduce a different mixer type, which was, called air mode, actually, because, it's not the air mode. Air mode was just an add-on on it. It needed a different mixer approach to be able to do a full stabilization on zero throttle. So that's one of the other things for example, what's
Fantastic. So one of the things I know, Jack, you had a question about best practice, because we've talked about RC rates, endpoints, tuning, and a couple of things. I appreciate that Betaflight is more the sandbox, the test environment, where Cleanflight, and thank you for explaining that, where Cleanflight is more of the stable, managed, lots of code, and things will drop into Cleanflight as they can. But if I was setting up a brand new quad, what would be your recommended, what's your process for going through in terms of setting up RC rates, endpoints, timings? Is there a handful of things that you do to set up a quad so that it's ready for a first flight? And if there is, can you kind of take us through that?
Yeah, it depends how experienced you are. So that there's a big difference from someone who never flew a quad before and someone who's experienced. So there's a huge difference in that. I always recommend actually now for the new pilots, definitely to try simulators. Don't fly, don't go out to field with a real quad or real multi-rotor before you really tried simulators. So that's a couple of years ago, there weren't really any good simulators to try this stuff out. So we were all just starting to fly and learning on the field. But it is so much faster if you have a good, solid simulator, configured very well. You can learn so much more before you even start FPVing or flying. For example, line of sight is a bit different. It's not something, of course, you can still learn controls, but the real thing with FPV, if you do it on a simulator, I saw some new guys trying simulator and then starting to flying, and there's a huge difference. They get so much further ahead than the guys who were starting just without the simulator. So that's my first recommendation, to understand the difference between the acro mode, level mode, those kind of things. Before, you would start level mode, you would fly level mode for a while, and then you would start transitioning into acro mode. That's for example what people tend to do before. But now actually with these simulators, you can start flying acro mode and even skip the level part. Just immediately go for the real flying. So that's what you see. All the pilots end up eventually flying acro mode. Well, that's the first step. And then the second step, of course, tuning your rates. With PIDs, for example. PIDs, I even think the PIDs are not that crucial in terms of feel. It has to be stable. It doesn't, you don't want to oscillate. Definitely not. It needs to be a bit tighter, not too loose, which, default pits are like, for example, on maybe 80-90% of the cases, really, enough to fly, to learn flying.
Yep.
So it may not be perfect, you would still have maybe a little bounce after fast flips, or even little, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but it should be fine. You should not put a lot of focus in that. Rates are more important, for example. So it also depends from the use. Some users really, for example, you have the guys who start pinching. There's pinching, there's thumbing. There are different ways to hold your stick, and there's a difference in there. For example, if you start with thumb flying, you would need a lower rates than the guys who are used to pinching. That's something I noticed. I started with thumbs as well, and I converted like 1.5 years ago. I started converting because I really noticed. I knew there's much more resolution. You get free resolution without extra hardware. That's what someone said to me. So that's exactly what it is. You just get this fine resolution on the small movements around the mid stick, and that can change the way you want your rates to have configured. You can have much higher rates without feeling the same way for someone who flies with thumbs. That's one of the differences. You cannot just take someone's rates or someone's settings and think that's good for me. You really have to think about. One good example was last week. I believe it was last week. I was with the guys of Connex testing their HD system, and they set up a course, the track with the gates and stuff. So they gave me their quad with the HD system on it, and it was completely, it was a really bad tune in terms of RC rate. And I was flying, and I was really flying. I didn't want to mess in the beginning because I was really interested to see the HD footage. I really didn't care about the tune itself. And I wanted, to go around the course, and I was really having a hard time to hitting these gates because the expo was completely off. It was like really high rates without any, center stick precision. So it's like, I was really working hard on a high speed to hit these small Grosvenor gates. It's a really, really tight gap, with even some wind making the gates go lower than it is.
Yep.
So I was really, I could fly with it, with experience and stuff, but I was just missing the fine precision, to line up with the gate correctly and to make a nice coordinated turn. And of course, it's you get there, but with a hard work. So it's really important to feel the kind of flying you want to do. It's to be able to feel your stick correctly, to do fine precision when you want to hit the gap, that you really can, line up exactly there where you want it to be. And that's mostly the rates. Of course, PIDs are important as well, but the rates are really important. That's what I learned in this hobby. There's a lot of, you want to pay attention a lot. Don't focus to have just high rates, fast flips or rolls, and lose some mid stick. You have to have configured both as well, properly.
Fantastic. So, I actually had somebody sent me an email the other day because we're hoping to get our hands on one of the new Connex systems in the next week or two. And one of the subscribers sent me a message saying that he'd seen some video of some test pilots, and the test pilots looked like they weren't having a good time. And he read into that there was problems with the Connex system. Sounds like it might have been problems with the tune of the quadcopter then, rather than the FPV system itself.
Yeah, rolling shutter.
Well, yeah, that might be. I finally retuned the quad and I had a real fun, but it was still, it was not my. Well, especially lately, I was flying some quite responsive ESCs, for example, and 5S. I converted to 5S since a month, and I was flying like every day, testing these quads on 5S, and then I flew a 4S quad with really unresponsive ESCs, which made a lot of difference as well. And another difference I had with the HD system was although it was a really good image, high quality, really good, definitely much sharper, but it was 30 FPS, 30 frames per second. So you wouldn't say that you notice that much, but it's quite important to have a good fluid frame rate. Like when you do, gaming, for example, online gaming stuff, the frame rate is important as well. So I was really noticing this 30 FPS making it a little bit, how do you say it? Less fluid, but also less the feel that it's real, how to explain the movement, the motion, the fast motion when you do flips or rolls, you could see a little bit ghosting through this 30 FPS, much more, how do you call this effect, when everything smooths out on high speed?
Like blur. Blur or smearing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you notice more. So, for example, SD systems, we have now the analog systems. You can fly really, really fast and try to pay attention if you have a good DVR recording, you will see that the ground details will still be sharp. There won't be much difference between fast or slow flying in terms of losing the detail. That was one of the things I learned from that. It's not just the sharpness; it's also the blurriness, which analog systems don't have that actually. If you have just a regular FPV cam, CCD cam, it has a really nice and sharp image. That was one of the things I noticed with the AG system, but I still enjoyed it. I really liked it actually. I was seeing some little branches which I would normally not be able to see. For example, we were racing below the trees, and I was just able to see, there were some gates behind those trees, and normally you would see the trees and you wouldn't really pick up the details far away behind those trees. Maybe you would see a glimpse of gate, you will see the color of gate, but now I was able to look through the gate. The gate was 100 meter further, small gate, and I was able to look through the gate, and hard to explain. It was a bit like flying on a GoPro image. They also had a high performance mode, which was 60 FPS, but lower detail, kind of similar detail than we have now on SD, and that felt better, of course, but it wasn't a big win compared to a SD system. One of the big advantages I saw, probably the biggest advantage, definitely the biggest advantage of their system, is the signal stability. I was really amazed by that. I was in the France event like 2 months ago, and they let me try their system, and it was really bad. That's never going to be something, but it appeared to be that on that system the antenna was broken. They found it after I flew it.
Right.
Of course, there were a lot of guys trying it out that day, crashing. So somebody broke the antenna, and I tried a bad system. But this time they show me that the image stability, it's phenomenal. It's completely, we tend to see a lot of glitches, a little, lines in our screens when we go behind the trees, behind we got used to that, this little static.
Yeah.
And on their system, I didn't see a single piece of static, through, behind the tree, within the area of 100 meters where we were racing.
Yep.
It was completely stable, definitely much more stable.
That's really interesting, because I looking at the specs, it looks like the transmission system runs at 60 frames per second anyway, but they coupled it with a 30 frame per second camera. So I'm interested to see what the final specs are, and how it actually works. But I'm excited to get my hands on the kit now after that review from your good self. It's kind of put some of my fears to rest. Hopefully other people will be excited now as well.
Boris,
Yeah.
I've got some KISS ESCs, one shot 42. I've heard a rumor that you've made a hex for a KISS flight controller. Is that true?
Yeah, true. It's version 3.0. Well, actually, I had it for a while. Felix, the guy who designed the KISS controller initially, he announced to be that when the KISS FC came, he approached me and he said, if I want to have I talked with him for a while, not about this only, but also about other stuff in the beginning. So yeah, he gave me a lot of information about the hardware to be able to make the target itself. And I already had this file. I already had a working version, but it wasn't really complete. It was missing some stuff. But the project kind of got lost. I talked to Felix later, and he was so busy. When the KISS flight controllers came, they, a lot of bugs started popping up. So all this energy went into solving, those bugs and getting, so which I don't mind, of course. I told him, take your time. That's more important than having a port to another firmware. But yeah, eventually with the new rework for the IO rework we did on 3.0, where it's much easier to get to introduce new targets. And KISS FC has some special stuff in there, some inverted signals which weren't there on the regular targets. They use buffers. For example, the ESC. Normally we have a flight controller which is directly connected to the ESC. There's just the pin goes through the PCB directly to the pin which goes to the ESC. On the KISS flight controllers, you have these buffers, 5-volt buffers. Normally, many people don't know, but the STM32 has 3.3 volt output. That's 3.3 volt logic, and that goes directly into the ESC. While most of the ESCs, are happy with 3.3, and they work, but they're more spec'd to 5 volt. So what they did on KISS flight controllers is they had a buffer which changes the logic from 3.3 to 5 volts. So the ESCs always get the 5 volt. That's one of the main differences between the other Cleanflight hardware and what else? because of that, you're not able to do the pass-through feature, for example. You will never be able to do programming of BLHEL ESCs like you can do with Cleanflight or Betaflight, because these buffers, the ESCs are not able to talk back. It's one way, one directional communication because of that. But
like the old Tornado board.
Yeah, the old Tornado board had something similar. Yeah, exactly.
What loop time can I run my controller on if I'm using the 42
on a KISS flight controller?
Yeah.
On a KISS flight controller, you would be. It's actually the same like SPF racing target. If you're familiar with that, it's I2C connected to MPU 6050.
Yep.
And that's usually good up to 2 kilohertz without level mode, without the accelerometer. It's 4 kilohertz. Sorry. That's the fastest you can get, and it's not. The limitation is the I2C interface, but it's not necessary that the faster you can go, that the better we'll get. It's maybe there are a lot of opinions about that. It's, in my opinion, it's not it's not really gonna change much if you go faster. I think 4K is more than enough. Technically, theoretically, when you get 4K samples out of gyro, you would be able to see a lot of stuff and still be able to filter it all necessary information. So it's all about seeing. The more information you see, the more information you can filter. If you don't see some particular noise, you will not be able to filter it correctly. For example, if you're looking for, if there's a easy example, if you're looking for, how can I explain that easily? If you're looking for a high frequency noise, for example, 2 kilohertz, if there's a 2 kilohertz noise, and if you're not looking faster than that, you won't see it. It will get downfolded to lower frequency noise. So actually, you can get ghost signal because you're undersampling something.
Aliasing.
Yeah. Isn't the rule of thumb you have to sample at least twice the frequency in order to spot the noise?
At least, but it's recommended to have 10 times. 10 times sampling means you're going to see enough. So, for example, if you want to see 50 hertz, the best is to sample 500 hertz.
Okay.
Not just 500 to see 10 times the frequency. If you have a noise, motor noise is typically around 300 hertz. That's typically where the motors, the RPMs produce the noise. So you would have to sample around, theoretically around 3K to be able to see that perfectly, to see the oscillations perfectly, and on that way you can also filter it. If you're undersampling it, if you're doing 1K and you have a 300K, you might get some artifact, some aliasing.
We're almost into Fourier analysis. I haven't done that for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Jack. I've got a question about KISS flight controllers and Super Expo, but I'll go next.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, right? So, if you're running at what did you say, 4K for the KISS flight controller, how does that differ with, say, something like the Cyclone running KISS ESCs at 1shot 42?
So if you're running KISS FC with the KISS firmware, you mean?
No, running a Cyclone with KISS ESCs running.
With KISS ESCs.
1shot 42.
Yeah. Well, there are different variations of setups. I'm running. Well, I like the KISS ESCs the most from what I tried. They're for me definitely the ultimate, the best, especially the KISS 24. I tried. It's definitely it's measurable. Even the biggest difference, for example, with others is the big, huge amount of braking power they have. It really does make a difference. It's you won't believe it's we're talking about the loop times 4K, 2K, but they can be faster. I think up to 10 milliseconds, between 10 and 15 milliseconds faster than other ECs. That means when you lower the RPM to a certain level, you will get there faster, much faster. And for example, we all know that acceleration from motors is accelerating power or speed from motors, ECs, at the moment is much faster than deaccelerating. How does that reflect in the way the PID controller works with it? PID controller doesn't really see the difference between deacceleration or acceleration. When it wants to correct, it assumes everything's symmetric. There's no, so for example, you get certain inaccuracy, especially with prop wash, where stabilization requires some quick, deaccelerating and accelerating of the motors. The PID controller will think that it has it gets some kind of desired correction from the motors while the motor is still deaccelerating. And you can get more prop wash, for example. With the KISS ESCs, with better braking, you will definitely notice much better resistance for prop wash. But especially in for example, if you do racing and you're using these very low gates, and the height is really important. And when you misline the gate and you're going up high, you can always, it's much easier to get lower. You definitely notice that braking power helps you, decrease the altitude much faster. But there's also other alternatives. BLHES, for example, it's really close to KISS ESCs in terms of other stuff. The throttle smoothness. It has dedicated PWM drivers, which that definitely makes a huge difference in the way how smooth the motors sound. Actually, how well the timing is, to the motors. That's not really something I'm specialized in the motor stuff, but when you do PID controllers and things, you definitely are looking a lot in differences in ESCs, and. It's definitely very close to KISS ESCs. The only difference is the braking part, actually. But it's BLHES. Stefan is working really hard lately, and the firmware probably might get there soon. I think there are small differences in hardware actually at the moment. It's more up to firmware in the because KISS ESCs have had this dedicated PWM drivers for a long while, since KISS 18 amp ESCs actually. They were using this really slow 8-bit chip, like Simon K used, but they had a dedicated chip which was driving the motors, so that made a huge difference.
So, Boris, I'm a big fan of all the KISS technology here, I must admit. I know Paul and the gang over there, and they even hooked Jack up with some kit a couple of months ago. So, and they're a lovely bunch. And the first time I ever flew a KISS flight controller, I was kind of blown away by how stable it was. Now, one of Joshua's videos recently talking about the latest version of Betaflight talked about something called Super Expo, and how that was trying to give that same kind of locked-in feel that you get from the KISS flight controller with its own firmware. I wondered, is that what that's all about, and is that what you're trying to do?
Have we lost him?
We've lost him. Hang on, let me try and get him back.
No worries, that's his 4G. I've got Joshua Bardwell.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, I've got Joshua Bardwell.
I think my connection, well. My Wi-Fi, I'm switching between Wi-Fi or 3G.
That's all right. So sorry, go on. Sorry about that. Go on, Jack.
Later on,
you were talking about the last thing I heard was the kit you received a kit of KISS.
Yeah, very
KISS
grateful.
Stuff, KISS technology, and
changed my life.
But then my connection dropped. So.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of the KISS flight controller. I know Paul and the gang over there, and that we've put together the flight controller with a 24. ESCs, and absolutely loved it. It was one of the first ever models I ever flew where, when you're coming down to land, there's usually that little bounce before you start tuning it, as it hits its own downwash. And the KISS flight controller, straight out the gate, without changing anything, felt like I'd already been spending.
Just a second. I think. Wait a second. I think my Wi-Fi is still bad. I'm gonna switch to 3G. I may drop, but
Okay, all right, no worries.
Nice. Yeah. Later on, I've got Joshua Bardwell on Skype if you want to add him in a bit, just to like, you know, obviously add to the professionalism. So I was messaging him whilst Boris was talking about him. I was like, oh, I'm just in a chat with you know, doing a podcast with Painless 360 and Boris B and they're talking about you, and he's like, awesome, and I'm like, yeah, we're singing your praises. He's like, add me to the call. So I might just add him. Like,
I think we need to. That would be awesome.
yeah. So
Hi,
I've been trying to add
switched
him
off
for
my Wi-Fi.
ages, but Boris just keeps talking. It's great.
So Boris, we'll have a third crack at this question. So I'm a big fan of the KISS flight controller. So Paul and the gang over there sent us the flight controller. We built one in a series and put the 24 amp speed controllers on it, and I absolutely loved it. And I was blown away by how locked in it felt straight out the gate. It felt as though I'd already spent half an hour or half a day, in fact, doing the tuning. And I know watching one of Joshua's videos, there's some stuff about Super Expo, and he was mentioning about KISS flight controllers. Could you talk a little bit about that? And because I understand from what he was saying, there's some work to try and give that same locked-in feel to Betaflight.
Well, first of all, to say a lot of people who tried KISS flight controllers, actually, they always, you know, go from some regular ESCs, they go to a full KISS setup. But in my opinion, from what I experienced, is that the KISS ESCs are like maybe the biggest contribution to that field, because they all, even if you put them on the Cleanflight, whatever kind of software it is, they were always kind of giving more easier. Like, you don't need a lot of tuning with it. It's this low latency, helps so much that you almost, to me, it always flew much better than the others. I knew it from the days when the KISS 18 KISS 18 amp ESCs came out.
I loved those, but they just catch on fire.
Definitely, the KISS ESCs definitely make the huge difference. Another thing, what I noticed, you know, I have a lot of guys, bunch of guys I fly with it, is that the KISS rate implementation uses the old, I don't know how many of you flew multi-V before.
Oh,
Yep.
I loved multi-V. The GPS code used to work.
Yeah, but if you ever try the acro, you know, real acrobatic, you know, acro mode in multi-V, they use this also similar like KISS approach with the super expo rates.
Yep.
That's where the Cleanflight or, you know, the current Cleanflight and Betaflight, old Betaflight, you know, just all the rate implementation was linear. You know, it was very linear, very rough. For example, the expo we were using, the RC expo, it was only a 5-point expo. There were just 5 points, rough points. You know, it wasn't a smooth line. So when you're moving stick, it's really, you know, you get these steps in it, and it was way too linear. You know, linear in the way that it gets a bit twitchy. Like I said, that's a lot of people cannot tune their quad because they think it's a PIDs, but a lot of times it's just the rates, you know, especially some beginners flying with very twitchy quads, not able to coordinate it, playing with the PIDs, you know, making it oscillate. While with a good rate set, smooth rates, you could do half job, you know, could give you a feel much better, easier feel, much better control. So that's one of the differences that KISS uses. They use a rate which instead of they do two things. It's not they have normal rate, which is a linear interpolation of the of your stick command. If you just, you know, it's a straight line from 0 to full rate. There's no any curves in it, so you can add expo to it or whatever. But they also have a kind of, you know, exponential rate, which increases the rate, but it also gives a little bit expo in it. And it's also what it does differently, and it relaxes the PID controller as well. So you get a dynamic behavior. It's not only doing the rate stuff, but it also relaxes the way how the PID controller works. So the more stick input you get more rates, more exponential rates, but also the behavior of PID controller is manipulated. Like for example, if you have a P of 5, that P is going to act differently with more or less stick input. So that's the way they did on multi-V. It's exactly quite a similar approach, actually the same. Maybe I don't know. I don't know the details, but well, that's actually the Felix, the guy. Everybody, if you know him, he always worked on a multi-V project. He comes from the multi-V days. He did a lot of code there, and Flightwino always did a lot in multi-V. So you definitely see those parts in the KISS flight controller, which is just similar. It has a lot of similarities to multi-V. I also always liked the multi-V project before, definitely.
I just didn't like the GUI. The GUI for multi-V was horrible. It's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, but if you had the multi-V very perfectly tuned, it was awesome. The multi-V out of the box, it wasn't great. It wasn't really well tuned, and even the default rates weren't good. If you had that tuned, you could really have I know the guys who were once I was flying Cleanflight, and even before I started the Betaflight, a couple of guys on the field we were always flying in Belgium. There were a couple of guys still flying the 8-bit multi-V. They always liked it better, and I was like, come on, man, that's old. I was more the guy, that's old hardware, that's crap, that's 8-bit. But then I tried. It gave me, it was like, okay, I knew I tried it once before, when I couldn't really fly, so I couldn't really judge. And so he gave me, he said, well, just fly for a flight, just see how it feels. And I flew for one flight. I was like, whoa, damn, that flew really good. Well. Yeah, it was really good. But it was such a hassle to configure, and you have to be almost a programmer to make it work.
Yeah. Yep. The multi-V.
There was no CLI. There was not. You want to change some stuff, you need to compile, and you need to reflash it.
Yeah.
That was actually.
Them were the days when you had to fire up your Arduino compiler.
I know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Well, one
that
day.
Was a turn off for a lot of people.
Yeah. One day we will be implementing KK2 code, and we'll just be sat here with our minds blown. Anyway, someone who's risking getting fired has joined us. Joshua Bardwell. Unless he's in a coma. Hello, Josh. Josh is definitely here. Hello?
Don't be shy, Josh.
Josh. Oh God. Can you hear us? It's a question. Oh, he's useless. I can hear you. My mic is on. I don't know. We can't hear you.
No, we can't hear you at all, Joshua, which is a shame because I want to tell you how big a fan I am.
Yeah, I am. This is so weird. Like no one's going to believe us that we're all here together.
Oh.
No one. Josh weren't really there. Find a way of fixing it. Have you got any Apple headphones or something? I don't. I give up.
Does he hear us?
Yeah, he can hear us.
Yeah, he's got no idea at the moment. Okay, Joshua, just while you're fixing that, can I ask one more question of Boris?
Go.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to come back. Your question was about Super Expo, right?
Yeah, it was. It was about how that was, and Joshua did a great job of talking about that in one of his videos, and mentioned the KISS stuff, which immediately grabbed my attention because of my experience with it. So I just wondered, what was that all about, and is that right? Is it a KISS kind of feel for Super Expo?
It's a part of it. It's not only that, of course. It does. For example, for a lot of newcomers, I saw some guys, who were struggling with the rates, having really, too high rates for what they could handle. And, just seeing other guys flying those rates, thinking, okay, that's what I should fly because I need to flip that fast or roll that fast. And when they get this super expo rates, they kind of feel that they are getting they become a better pilot because they get much more control, like they would fly with low rates. You get a nice, fine mid-stick control, and you still can get the same or even faster flip and roll rates. With the same rates, because the exponential curve gets much better to handle for them, and that's one of the key things, to especially guys who, like I said, the rates are maybe half of the tuning. It really determines how your quad feels. You can have a perfectly tuned quad, screw up your rates, and it won't feel right anymore. You will not be able to fly it really well. It's So that's one of the things what does a lot. It's not the only thing, I'm not saying that that's the only thing to make it feel better, but it certainly helps.
So it is going to come to Betaflight.
Well, yeah, I introduced also the same actually exponential rates, super expo rates, which I really like actually. I did a difference with, but I'm still looking good way to I'm not relaxing the PID controller. I just add these rates to still have a sharp and full sharp response from the quad. I'm not relaxing the PID controller on that part, but I feel that I should do something because I do some dynamic stuff in it. I already had that. For example, there's a traditional PID controller, like always working the same. Doesn't matter how fast you flip or roll or how you fly, but there's a certain difference in how PID controllers should act under different circumstances. For example, I term, everybody knows about the I gain. We have, because if we don't have I gain, we would have drift. I gain is kind of slow, the slowest one of them all. What's perfectly fine in normal situations, but when we get in heavily dynamic situation like fast flips, fast rolls, or more stiff stick reflection, the I term can actually work against you because it's too slow to handle that dynamic situation. So you need to tame it down. You need to prevent the wind-ups, which really winding up of the I term, which really can mess up your tune. You can get more bounce backs because the I term is lagging behind the P or D, and it tries to do corrections after P and D already finished doing their stuff. So, and that's kind of stuff. What I did a lot lately in the last few weeks, months to improve, and even it's not something new. Even other projects, when you look in the Open Pilot with the Acro Plus or Multi-V, they also did kind of those things preventing wind up, because wind up is really a big issue if you're acro flyer, in a dynamic situation. And that's also one of the things what you see in KISS flight controller, which they handle really well. The wind up is really, they have a good logic in there.
Yeah, because a lot of people were mistaking it for prop wash and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's in my opinion really determined by the ECs. ECs are the key factor in there. Of course the PID tuning, but the ECs definitely make a lot of difference in there.
Okay.